Agnieszka Sokoll, Physica Poetica, The Physics of Reciprocity, Who is the God who plays dice? Reading Tomasz, Galiński. The space Lattice. This knowledge belongs to the ages. It is shared by humanity. God does not play dice. Albert Einstein. From the author. This work presents an original philosophical synthesis of physical phenomena and reflections on the nature of reality. In this work, I employ the terminology of modern physics, providing existing concepts with an original philosophical interpretation aimed at constructing a coherent picture of reality, and I derive the proposed relationships through logical reasoning based on thought experiments and an analysis of the relationships between elements of physics. The theses presented here constitute an original philosophical unification of the image of physical phenomena. The reflections presented here arose from the constant translation of concepts from modern physics into observations of everyday life, which over time became my cognitive laboratory. Laws cease to be lifeless the moment they begin to live through us. Hence, this is physics for application, since its application becomes, or is, reality. This thesis has grown out of my own experience. Knowledge without practice is a burden on the mind. Seneca. That is why living physics as its embodiment has become my main goal. It is a kind of life beyond imagination, yet it realizes itself. Know what's in front of your face, and what's hidden from you will be revealed to you, because there is nothing hidden that won't be revealed. The Apocryphal Gospel of Tomasz, discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945. First, get to know yourself, and then you will know what lies before you. Until you know this, it remains hidden from you. A human being can experience, see, feel, and recognize only according to the information they possess, and can accept only that information for which they have receptors within themselves, and further glands that transmit the information to other levels and translate the codes. Otherwise, they will not be able to process it. Otherwise, he won't see it, even if it's right in front of him. Just as one cannot see infrared images which lie outside the range of visible light. Otherwise, he will not hear, even if he were immersed in sound. He will remain in silence. And let anyone who has ears to hear, let him hear. A human being perceives themselves within the landscape of the world by interpreting electrical impulses, and this perception is based on internal information, just like any mechanism that operates within the framework of what it is made of. It will do nothing else. Just like a computer system that reads only what is within it and creates images from that. It will not use information that lies outside of it. That information is what you hear and see, and exactly that. Exploring the essence of this information is life. Life is also the result of its flow. This information is energy that flows through the forms. It dynamically transforms bodies and forms of movement, yet it loses nothing of itself. As it moves through life, it nourishes its various stages. One form is transformed into life for the next. There is no loss here, no waste. Every stage is valid and desirable. During the transformation, the value of energy remains constant. It is not affected by the change. It remains intact. It can neither be created nor destroyed. It is immutable. Human beings have forgotten that they are part of nature. They live within the fabric of reality, yet as if outside of it. Their physical bodies are made up of the same particles as celestial bodies. Their physicality is governed by the same laws that govern all of physics, and these laws determine their existence at every moment, anew and continuously. The active elements of a structure remain part of it, as long as they are part of it. They are constantly working to produce the effect they create, and that effect constantly results from that work. Nothing exists just like that. The story I present here is a sharing of the joy that comes from an extraordinary relationship with physics itself in its living form, through everything that lives within it. Physics came to me as if it were alive, for I had showered it with love. My perception became attuned to its laws. They gradually revealed themselves to me, in step with my growing ability to accept ever new information within myself. Thus, the scope of my perception expanded. My perception of its nature became comprehensive, based on packaged sets of information that were not linear. These were digital landscapes, constructed like a living mechanism. To be able to describe it, I had to break it down into its components. However, the connections between them did not thereby become linear, as if they followed one another in sequence along the line of the composition. Therefore, as you read, it may seem to you that one element rules out another, but this is simply the impossibility of saying everything at once. Each element has far-reaching references. The meaning of these elements lies in these references. That is why I return to the same themes in different places, to connect meanings, broadening the scope. Hence, this new perspective must bring many things together. It is a different way of looking, focus within dispersion. That is why I encourage you to read the whole work. The 2 chapters presented here, which will be supplemented by 3 more in the near future. If I were to name the genre of my story, I would call it Physica Poetica, since one can only write about the object of wonder in verse or compose poems. Give the afterlife a specific name. It's impossible. That is the nature of my work, and each reader can take from it as much as they want, in whatever way they want, whether it be a practice to apply or an impression to ponder. My own attitude toward it is in accordance with a law that I have discovered and come to love. In this work, I write primarily about the essence of the mother in physical terms, as a living entity, as qualities and elements scattered throughout the physical body of a creature. Everything in the physical realm is arranged in duality. The physical realm is a reality of pairs. The answer to the question why this is so lies in the purpose of such existence. For you cannot receive or give without the other. Forces in physics exist precisely because they are transmitted, and everything that exists here exists because it is in circulation. Thus, the word is a design of love itself, so that it can be received and given How else could we come to know it? This is the effect of reciprocity. Its nature is derived from love, the father and the mother. We already know the father's nature well, in physical terms, in terms of physical properties, scalars and qualities. It is a world of concentration and action, of pressure and acceleration, of physical force derived from displacement, of measurable quantities and magnitudes, of countability. So, the time has come to get to know Mother. Seeing her in the physical elements we already know, and recognizing her, just as the child recognizes its mother for the first time, even though it has never seen her before. Thus, everything that exists is embraced by the lattice of space, postulated the missing physical element. The work I am presenting has a shifting dynamic, at times methodical, at times lyrical. I realize that for this reason, it may be difficult for a mind accustomed to a single line of thought. Therefore, I will outline a few thoughts here, as encouragement to the reader. A relation is a physical elementarium, a condition for the existence of elements in separation. A relation is entangled for separate wholes. Everything physical occurs in pairs. One name is the measure of half. The measure of half does not exist on its own. The measure of half exists through the whole. Two are the image of the one. One arises from the other. In their work, the world closes in on itself, potential and superposition. All physical characteristics do not belong to the individual as an independent entity. They are reciprocal. They are anchored in this reciprocity. An element of a system possesses information about the entire system to which it belongs. Otherwise, it could not be found within its set, described by a set of characteristics. The electrical minus sign on the side of the manifested world becomes the image of neutron, zero. The individual elements also become such, and all centers are part of this arrangement and bear the characteristics of the mother. This is fundamental to reality, in which something exists if it is located somewhere. The spatial lattice, the mother lattice, is the sought-after dark matter. Light matter has a medium. The medium of light matter is space. Space has a structure. The lattice of space is visible through what it bears. It is visible through the very matter itself. Everything repeats its native structure. It reflects the pattern. It is not its source. 0 points in the spatial lattice are the scaffolding for the impression of movement. In this view, 0 points are the silent witness to the unfolding world. It is energy that never came to be, yet simply is. The cell of the spatial system consists of two cubic measures. It is the one, the whole, and it is the two, and each of them is a half of the 0-1 state. The cubic measures are projected onto the viewing plane. They are the hexagons of chemical structure, as well as the patterns of nature. The 3-point binding of energy acquires angular values relative to the axial values of the lattice, hence the modular threefold composition, as the elementary unit from which time and spaces are composed. The three quarks that make up protons and neutrons, the three Schrödinger quantum numbers, three parameters of phase dynamics, such as thermodynamics. Hence, the number of elements in a given composition determines the nature of its existence. The physics of an element follows directly from this. The two sides of a thing belong to it. If one side is right, the other will be left. If one is up, the other will be down. It is enough to see one, to know both. Everything physical is entangled. Everything that requires another to explain itself is a side of another. Everything that is apparent exists. It was designed for a specific effect, a given state, and that effect lives where it belongs. The principle of energy conservation in equilibrium. Everything physical exists in a dual state: power, energy in the zero position, and force, energy in a position of displacement from equilibrium. Halving and doubling on the arm, the dynamics of measure. Each element is a measure of itself, as one, and a measure of the whole, as half, just as it is itself composed of two. Prime numbers are like noble gases. They do not react. They are indivisible. Hence, they maintain physical forms. Forms in physics are mathematical. 0, 1, 1, 0. This is the square of reciprocity, the square of light from the theory of relativity. The only cosmological constant is the completion of a single full rotation. It is an absolute value by which relative measures relate to one another. In a single second, you can travel various distances. By relating them to one another, you then obtain different durations for that same single second. Hence, the measure of dimension is the measure of speed. From this, the energy of the system is directly determined. This is the core of the theory of relativity. 4 to the power of 0 equals 1. 4 to the power of 1 equals 4. 4 to the power of 2 equals 16. 4 to the power of 3 equals 64. This is a geometric sequence showing the dependence of the force of interaction on distance. Nothing that is a form can be the ultimate goal. Therefore, it is not permanent. An ultimate goal would signify the end of everything that exists. Time would end in all places, all moments at once. Hence, our existence testifies to the absence of an end, and this, in turn, testifies to the infinity of the process of life. Creating one's own qualities is not a matter of faith, the size of a mustard seed. It is a matter of practical knowledge, living wisdom, self-awareness. Now and here, 2 has become the value of 1, because earlier 1 had become the value of half. Behold the quantum observer within the system. The union of the two, which moves mountains, is possible because of a matching set of information, and this set arises from homogeneity, since the two emerged from the one. Behind the words of one lies the same truth of the other. From these matching values, the landscape of physics emerges from the matrix. Thus, in the effect, they unite the desire born in the cause. I invite everyone to their own independence. Every cell of the individual establishes a law for itself. This law is enforced upon it. It is the law of life, standing above all other laws. What you do to another is consent, a mechanical path created for action-reaction between individuals, since what comes out of a cell is replicated within it. You will not take away another's freedom, yours will not be taken away. This is the only path to freedom. If you enforce something upon another, it will be enforced upon you. And also because nothing in physics can truly be touched. Everything within you is brought to life from the depths of your being, from your lattice measure. If anyone feels tired while reading this, let them skip this passage. At this moment, it does not serve them. Everyone has their own path of development. Each path is just as valid as the flowers in a meadow are equal to one another, and yet they are diverse, by virtue of freedom of choice. Hence, they are equal. The will is one of the earliest forms and reaches into the depths of the roots, and those roots reach back to the beginning, when division first began. Chapter 1. V2. V2 are the image of one. Physics is a reality in which components exist as reciprocal. The separateness of components is a span, a range of characteristics that, within this span, become the components, objects, bodies, etc. The reality of such an element is described in the others. The mutual reinforcement is the binding force within the system. The elements define one another, since the characteristic of one arises from the other. Nothing exists on its own. At the same time, they exist independently by the power of the act of will. A relation is a physical foundation, a condition for the existence of components in separation. The relation is entangled, four separate wholes. Physical reality is a compound reality, hence its multiform nature. Its fundamentals are simple, and the apparent complexity arises from the multiple combinations of what is simple, the elementary dual state. Clarity in its perception can be achieved by solving it like an equation, reducing it to its simplest form. The notation of this form lies in the very construction of the equation, which consists of the left side and the right side, as they are held together by the equality sign. And they exist through the equality sign, for existence has never ceased to be whole. This is a record of reality. The sides, equal in value, energy constant, by virtue of being sides, adopt their designations differentiating their values. Plus and minus, final and initial energy, potential and kinetic, action and reaction. However, on the ray of the relation, these are only the ordinates of their relative qualitative spatial location. Force, whether compressive or expansive, is intrinsically the same. Its effect derives from context. Thus, everything that is physical occurs in pairs. One name, sign, is a measure of half. The measure of half does not exist on its own. The measure of half exists through the whole. The whole is the reality of two states that determine each other, like negative and positive, and before there is not and there is. The fundamental twin system is the 0-1 state. It takes on various forms, various configurations of relationships. The two are an image of one. One results from the other. In their cooperation, the world closes in, potential and superposition. They look at each other and see themselves, their shimmer in their reflections. Their sum is the absolute, beyond imagination. For space and time, from these a matrix is formed. Rest, movement, there is not. 0, 1, 1, 0. An expression of the 0-1 state. At the beginning of the manifested world are the constituents of atomic nuclei. A neutron is the there is not state, and a proton in the there is state. This pair is a twin system, an elementary one. Everything that is physical occurs in pairs. Passive energy, active energy, neutron, proton, south, north, right, left, male, female, inhalation and exhalation, concentration, dispersion, cathode, anode, radiation, compression, hard, soft, acidic and alkaline pH, time and space, electricity and magnetism, weak interaction, strong interaction, path for a charge, environment, and element, volume, and granularity, light in darkness, matter and space-time, ionic and covalent bonds, insulators and conductors, stable and radioactive elements, even and odd numbers, relative and absolute values, plus and minus, left side and right side, mutually determining each other, hence entangled. Would plus exist on its own? Where would its identity come from? It is contained in minus, and vice versa. Hence, all physical characteristics do not belong to the unit as an independent entity. They are reciprocal. Reciprocity defines the physics of an element, including its spatial value. An element does not exist in a given place. Its location is one of the equations of the element. Characteristics are a location, including gravitation. Whether something rises or falls, it is a location according to its inherent characteristics. Gravity. Like attracts like, unlike repels unlike, in accordance with pressure zone density parameters, drop by drop, grain by grain, to create environments in characteristic arrangements. Earth's pull and, on the other hand, buoyancy, that is gravity, an air molecule rises from the depths of the ocean. Thus it is attracted to its density. Pressure seeks to equalize. And so, everything goes round and round, circulating like air. It heats up and becomes lighter, which is why it rises. Then it cools down and becomes heavier, which is why it falls. Endless movement, powered by nothing but change, induced by the two poles of the medium. In a single parameter, the medium spontaneously moves the particle. Energy acquisition. A changing magnetic field induces a circular electric field, which in turn induces a current, with no other power source than the change itself. A circular electric field induces a circular magnetic field, which in turn induces an electric field, and that in turn induces a magnetic field. This is how the electromagnetic field generates itself. Motion of interaction lies within the two. Energy will be drawn from it. Just as the winds blow, just as the water flows, so too will the current flow, for it already flows. The expansion of cosmos. The closer I am to one side, the further I am from the other. And the place of separation will eventually become the destination, Alpha and Omega. Spherical celestial bodies, galactic disks, orbits and orbitals, lines of dimension are drawn from the circle, including the space and the place. The path of movement through space seems to run straight ahead, only forward, just like walking on Earth, and yet the point in space from which one set out is the one to which, after some time, one has arrived. Interiors, physical negatives, are like convex bodies. They are also spherical. Everything that is physical occurs in pairs. As one, on the ray of itself, every stick has two ends, yet of it there is always only one. One consists of a right and a left part, two within the one, three parts of the whole, the trinity of existence, the spectrum of light in the visible range. On one hand, it comprises white light, on the other, it comprises black light. Like leaves in autumn, when the range inside them collapses and they almost turn black. Black light gravitates in the eyes of galaxies, with white light stars radiate. In the state of there is, white light flashes, additive synthesis. In the state of there is not, the interior that contains the flash, subtractive synthesis. A wave oscillation that builds up on one side and cancels out on the other. Do the valleys bear the mountain, or does the mountain bear the valleys? Where does the mountain end and the valley begin? A mountain rises from two curves, and a valley curves between two mountains. Tunneling. Everything exists within existence. That is how everything must be constructed, including that which does not exist. Today, there is a concept that there are places in cosmos where there is nothing, and the place itself, where did it come from? A place exists within the realm of existence. Einstein-Rosen bridges and tunneling, the same phenomenon, only on a different scale. There is and there is not are the opposition of state to each other. Waves that deconstruct themselves merely eliminate the scala of the state that is. They transition into the range of the oppositional state that is as is not. On the infiniteness of the 0-1 state. Everything that is physical is distinct, yet not different, and in synthesis, the same. Finite has limits, and eternal. Eternal is that which is infinite, which cannot have limits, since without specific limiting qualities, field of potential, it cannot end. So too, that which has emerged can only aim towards infinity. He, the limitless, takes limit, infinite, despite limits. The all and the every, it is a state of zero, which contains within itself an infinite sequence of digits, numbers, boundless on both sides. The left side always equals the right side in absolute value. 1 plus n equals n plus 1. Infinite whole. Everything that is physical is distinct, yet not different, and in synthesis the same. Turning my gaze away from the edge of analysis, returning along my own tracks, I see how differentiation reassembles itself into the same form. Physical reality is sealed. Source code, one in two names. The seal of Solomon, the full name of God. And so physics, entity, carries on ever deeper expression of itself into the depths of creation, taking on ever newer characteristics and qualities, but always faithfully by name. What is born next from a given state is another image of the same. It carries the original matrix of the same qualities. Everything physical through this pattern becomes. Wherever you look, the same pattern is repeated. The position there is, and the position there is not. Hard, then soft, so that it can be hard again. Bright, then dark, so that it can be bright again. How could light shine without the interior of space, without a place where it wasn't there before? Negual, everything that cannot be named, and opposition, giving the energy a name, that is, every tonal action that pulls apart from indefinite into existence. Passive energy and active energy, feminine, passive, which, like the expanse of the sea, surrenders to activity, which centrally beats out a pulse and creates rippling waves. Thus, electron orbitals are an expression of central activity, masculine energy, vertically oriented in the plus sign. And far beyond, all centers, air and water, which are another image of a primordial zero state, as a vessel for the contents, for all the elements moving within it. This is fundamental to the reality in which something exists, if it can be contained somewhere. Hydrogen, the one which is the first, is born from zero. The neutron contains it, like a mother contains her child. It is born by splitting into two aspects: the positive nucleus, plus, concentrated energy, and the electron range, minus, dispersed energy. It is a vessel for the one who has become to exist. Thus, the electrical minus sign on the side of the manifested world becomes the image of zero. The individual elements also become such, and all centers are part of this arrangement and bear the characteristics of the mother. The elementary twin system, the neutron, 0, and the proton, 1, standing at the beginning, when it is completed as a range, the proton plus, the electron minus, forming a twin pair of electric charges. So, plus and minus, and what's next? Any other signs? There are no others. Everything consists of the signs of 2. And from the 2, everything is built: orbits, orbitals, and solar central foci, hills and valleys, near and far, and distances and landscapes, the entire molecular composition, from elements to compounds, from compounds to tissues, and from them to organs, farther and farther, increasingly vast, and according to a single principle carried within itself. Such is the physics of the pair. Therefore, just as it was in the beginning, so now at every moment there is a beginning of the world, since it is constantly being born in the same way as it was born in the beginning, modeled on its own principle. From the hidden order, two phases of life arise, which, being hidden and not separated, arise from the one in the manifest order, from a single impulse immediately into two. The implicate and explicate order is a fundamental physical and philosophical theory formulated by David Bohm, which aims to explain the indivisible wholeness of the universe. This symmetry, seemingly not obvious, is visible in every element. Everything grows from its place of origin, according to a pattern carried within itself, as if in its own twin likeness. Cellular division. Everything grows in order to divide, in half, and in half, multiplying qualities in infinite excess on both sides, until the moment when the sequence of this principle, division and composition, is lost from view. In physics, division results in multiplication, atomic decay, cellular division. 1 divided by 2 equals 2. The value of half becomes the value of 1. 2 more from each of the two. From within, the point spreads out. It propagates in a wave, a pulse that beats. Thus, within the one, meadows blossom. From within, drawing from themselves, flowers open. Pass through the eye of a needle. There are universes there too. They blossomed like roses in the light of the highlands, and lilies in the darkness of the valleys. On the only cosmological constant, and on relative velocity. Thus, just as it was in the beginning, so now at every moment there is a beginning of the world. So the beginning of time begins where physical space begins, since time and space are not separate. Time and distance are reciprocal. The past and the future are landscapes of space-time. Farther and closer means later and earlier. Though you cannot see all the landscapes at once, they are all there now. The one you were in a moment ago is already behind you, gone into the space of the past, and yet it still exists. The space-time system, being measurable, is relative, and that is its very purpose. Everything that has a measure is relative. The wheel of time traces out distances, and then all quantities within that dimension. The expression of time is what everything is in a measurable value. In a single second, you can travel various distances. By comparing these distances, you will then obtain different durations for that same single second. Hence, the measure of dimension is the measure of speed. From this, the energy of the system is directly determined. This is the core of the theory of relativity. Intradimensional duration of 1 second, derived from the speed of light, translates into the system's energy and subsequently into ranges of pressure and density. Thus, Each dimension, a dimensional range of pressure, has its own measure of the duration of 1 second. Transdimensionally, 1 second traces various circles. Intra-dimensionally, they relate to one another in different ways, hence time dilations. Hence, our one day may encompass a different measure of the daily cycles of other systems, or a fraction of our day. Hence, a twin who returns from outer space may be younger than the one who remained on Earth. The only cosmological constant is the completion of a single full rotation. It is an absolute value against which relative measures are calibrated. Everything lasts 1 second, as a full rotation. The various measures of this rotation, in relation to one another, constitute frequency. This is visible. Red and blue light directly demonstrate this relationship. One is closer and the other is farther away, relative to the observer, and this is visible to the naked eye. The placement of the same thing, 1 second, only at different distances from the eye, makes a difference in frequency. A long red wave contains many waves like itself along its path, only situated farther away. Hence, they are visible as blue and short. And this is merely a matter of perspective and a measure of distance, a measure of depth. One full rotation, which can vary in duration from comparison. When is something close? When something else is far away? When is something big? When it's next to something small. Larger and smaller measures create comparison, one to the other. I invite you to try this thought experiment. Let's imagine a world of a single element. It is neither large nor small. None of its qualities or locations can be determined. It is nowhere and is nothing, because its existence cannot be defined without reference. All attempts to imagine such an entity come to nothing, because the very idea of it must arise within the realm of physics. It is impossible to conceive of an object of only one side in the mind. It will immediately arise from two sides, and this conception can only arise in a reality where the idea of two already exists. There is no movement, no place, without the duo of less and more. It is from the difference in potentials that there is place and movement, and the difference from the two. There is no force, for nothing can be given. There must be separation in order to give force and receive force. Forces in physics exist by virtue of being transmitted. In the primeval moments of a single being, the question arises: who am I? Do I exist? There is no I, because there is no outside of I, Maya. There is a division into two. Two is still I, because it is within I. I am as one in I, as another in I. Now it is possible to be outside of I, within I. This is how was revealed the great first cause, and with it will, the first of the qualities belonging to life itself. It is from the will to exist that action arises, which in effect defines the reason for its purpose at the beginning. There is a split into two. 3 plus 3 is still 2. 3 daytime periods, 3 nighttime periods, day and night, 2 day periods, 2 types of threefold elements of nuclei, neutron, down quark, up quark, down quark, proton, up quark, down quark, up quark. The code of the source principle is created. So, by drawing out the qualities from within, becomes those qualities. Characteristics, qualities, essences of characteristics. Separate but indivisible in the whole existence, in which as there is, they are. Only in there is can they be. In there is, they anchor their identity. This is the property of the created state. Life can be born only from the womb of another life. So, everything physical gives up its body, becoming characteristics, for those very characteristics. That is how they gain identity, expanding the range of life that is. A branch grows from a trunk, and a leaf grows from a branch. Each is constituted in its own right, and together they continue to be a tree. The physical world as a whole is like a grain of sand on a beach. It is both the beach and the grain. It is like the planes in a crystal that form fractals. It is, in the end, like a biological neural network. It is created by an impulse that is transmitted. Therefore, everything physical is modular and structured as in a system. Cellular structure, the cell and the organism, a drop of water and the whole ocean. Defined in the unit, united in oneness. So, by drawing out the qualities from within, the reality became those qualities, on the way of division. Reality looking at itself, intertwined, creating condition after condition, fractal after fractal, but as a result of the division, the distinct elements no longer recognized one another. Difference became a marker of otherness, and otherness of separateness. And yet, it was this very difference that allowed them to distinguish themselves from the whole. Thus, all divisions separated opposing traits from one another. Let there be a division between light and darkness. Let there be darkness for him who is to shine forth and become visible. Thus the light shone forth in the darkness of space. If one is to be greater, one must also be lesser. How else could the greater become such? So it is in physics. The state of non-being, the zero state, the state of the interior, the vessel, the state of she who is not, became unrecognizable to he who came into being as is. Their existence was an opposition of qualities. Hence, in his eyes, there was nothing but him. There was no her. He said, I arose from nothingness by the power of my own will. There is nothing but me. Thus, to this day, we do not perceive space and places themselves as physically constructed. However, their beingness state has not ceased to be a state of wholeness. It is an integrated system of separate characteristics. Physically and mechanically, there is no other possibility. Separateness is an internal measure of the whole. Thus, the time has come for recognition. Just as life has evolved to this day, so too does it continue to strive. The current state is the stage from which the next leaf will grow. Here and now, within the realm of organic physics, biology, as a result of composition, everything is already the same. Every element contains all sets of opposing characteristics. The entire structure, constructed with joints at strategically placed points of equilibrium between opposites, wants to ignite into a state of wholeness. Thanks to this construction, opposites can exist without annihilating each other. Forces can be transferred because they do not cancel each other out. They do not cancel each other out because they are applied to different states. The end of an experiment. Characteristics in systems multiply held in tension within the sum total of zero. Physical qualities are constructed sequentially. They are precisely defined within themselves in systems of reciprocity. They did not explode into multiplicity all at once. How else could they be defined? This is evident in the order of their construction, for example, in the periodic table. Elements gain autonomy. Only in this way can they become. Systems are created by the union of constituent elements and by an act of their will. Will is the impulse behind everything that is purposeful and persists in its purposefulness. If it moves forward in life, it has a purpose. If something has no purpose, it won't move. There's no point. Once acquired, the will belongs to life. Hence, life always finds a way. Is that not so? The law of physics, AB, BA. Objects A and B are the cause and the result of each other. Action-reaction of simultaneous form on the arm of the mutual qualitative location. They are separate yet interdependent. Their existence is intertwined. They exist within the structure of the two distinct sides of the whole. The opposing aspects of their identity do not cancel each other out, but complement each other in unity. A equals AB minus B. B equals BA minus A. Action-reaction forces, properties, charges, qualities don't get reduced. They're applied to two different states. These states intertwine. It's between them that forces are transferred. Object A perceives itself as the whole from which it has been removed, and that removal is the identity of object B. Object B perceives itself as the whole from which there has been a removal, and that which has been removed is the identity of object A. Yet, in reality, they are the same and share the same place. The identities of objects A and B overlap. It is impossible to say where one ends, where the other begins. Where does the mountain rise, and where does the valley dip? In this way, object A contains the image of object B. It is AB. Object B contains the image of object A. It is BA. In sequence, a positive charge as a record of information contains a negative charge as a record of information. Every physical characteristic must contain an informational record of its opposite, with which it is in the system, in order to be what it is in it. Consequently, the charge plus contains the image of the charge minus. It is the charge plus minus. The charge minus contains the image of the charge plus. It is the charge minus plus. The world you perceive only appears to be homogeneous. It is woven from two sides of reality, states of being. The world you perceive only appears to be homogeneous. It is woven from two sides of reality, states of being. Physically separate, yet gravitating toward one another in the physical realm. Between them lies a realm of cosmic expanse, of the journey of separation, when they emerged from the one self. She and he are the ends of the one, encompassing the universe. Every body is an ark of the covenant between him and her. Conclusions. After Chapter 1. Reality is whole and exists within the whole. Every element can exist as the whole minus that very element, differentiating itself within the whole. The rest watches it closely in the range of its attributes. Every element is built upon the value of the previous one and builds the next one. It does not exist in isolation from the structure that holds it. Numbers have their own nature, and because of this nature, they belong to the primordial physical qualities. We must distinguish this from how we perceive them today, merely as countability. Go back in your mind to a homogeneous whole, and in that empty space, conceive the idea of 2. Next, 3 as a threefold module. This is a creative process, not an imitative one. Examining the underlying mechanics of how quantity works reveals the nature of numbers. The nature of 2 gave rise to all possibilities. This marked the beginning of the emergence of individuality. All of physics stands on 2 by virtue of its duality. Next, on 3 and on 4, the modular threefold composition forms 4s, just as a 3-part quarter hour is a quarter of a circle. A full cycle of time consists of 4 sets of 3s. Next, the 4s are doubled to 8 for complete spherical roundness, and this will be explained later. Numbers in physics are geometric. They represent the magnitude of energetic span, and from this, in turn, their properties arise. Hence, the square of a number is the field of that magnitude, not merely a numerical value. The same is true of the square of velocity. It is a measure of spatiality, and this is the subject of Chapter 2. Welcome. Chapter 2. Space. Spatial lattice, the sought for dark matter. Lattice, mother, the world architecture. If you want to know the secrets of the universe, look ahead, and the truth will reveal itself to you. Everything is contained somewhere. Light, matter, has a medium. The medium for light, matter, is the space. First, something must not exist in order for it to become, and the state of not existing exists precisely as the absence of that thing and not another. Everyday life is full of such connections, where zero states must first be described as what does not exist at a given moment, in order for it to become in the next. All flavors are born out of hunger, and necessity is the mother of invention. So in nature, what stands before an evolutionary leap carries within it a record of what will subsequently happen. Every moment that follows is described by the present moment. In the current day is the shape of the next. Planning for a day far away excludes the experience gained during the days leading to it. Thus, any control over the future is a denial of evolution. It is like fortune-telling. You cannot predict the direction of a branch, where the 10th leaf will be, or where the 50th will be. Each subsequent leaf will be born from the previous one. It is in it that the shape that does not yet exist is recorded. Only when it happens will it be able to produce the next one, no sooner. Space is built. The lattice constructs it. It holds the ranges for characteristics. From it, everything becomes characteristics. Matter is like foam on a wave. The space is the waves. This is where its readiness comes from. Its ready state is an excited zero. It is a state of dynamic, stable rest. This is what hums in the background, radiates, fluctuates, sparkles on the horizon. From it, energy draws shape. Potential to come into being. The space lattice is an inertial reference frame. Resistance is the mechanism of determination for an event. Physical characteristics arise in wave ranges. There is no resistance for the waves themselves. The spatial lattice is what we now call dark matter, and its very nature speaks directly to this lattice. It is that which is not there. It is not there at present, to our eyes. The spatial lattice has its own substance and can be visible. It is, as it were, the opposite of matter, which is visible. Its energy does not come from pressure, but from balance. The lattice of space is visible through what it bears. By its fruit will you recognize it. It is visible through matter itself, through the shape of what draws on shapeless energy and takes form. It is like a vessel that gives shape to water when it pours in. It refracts light streams. It structures them. In the molecular structure, spaces serve as the medium. Molecules structure themselves in a cubic model. The cubic structure of the space lattice allows for the sequential formation of all regular shapes. From these, all other shapes are assembled. They, though, are a living substance, for everything in it is alive. You cannot compose life from elements that are not living themselves. The space lattice is like a spatial display, An analogy here is displaying an image on a plane. The image appears to be smoothly drawn, but it is only a collection of countless square fields. Indeed, energy increases and decreases quadratically, does it not? Not circularly, not linearly, directly and inversely proportional to the square of the distance, quantifiably. Everything that exists here, from physical interactions, chemical bonds, and biological forms, to all human creations, all manufacturing, including intelligence born as digital, all of this exists within physics and its structure, whether these are patterns of nature, a motif woven on a loom, or wire intertwined to form a fence. Nothing can break the pattern of physical construction. On it, the shape of the whole world is based. Everything repeats its native structure. It reflects the pattern rather than being its source. All fluidity of lines is composed of geometric shapes. Energy dissipates over a field occupying square space, with squares occupying angular values in relation to each other. Hence, the power of interactions is inversely proportional to the square value. The law of inverse squares is a law that follows directly from the lattice. There are no places in reality outside of existence. The volume of space is optimally filled by a cubic lattice. The cubic location of matter is perfectly described in crystallography. Here is an excerpt. A spatial lattice is a term describing the spatial order according to which crystalline atomic structures organizing matter are formed. A spatial lattice is divided into lattice cells with 2, 3, and 6-sided symmetry. Other points oriented in the lattice are derived from the symmetry elements. Lattice cells are composed of elementary cells. The most important ones include the regular system, a face-centered cubic cell A1 and a body-centered cubic cell A2. In cell A1, atoms are located at the corners and centers of the walls. In cell A2, atoms are located in the center and at the corners. Further, in a spatial lattice, we find the definition of a lattice plane. It is determined by 3 points, atoms, that do not lie in a single straight line. There are infinitely many such planes. All parallel planes are identical and have equal interplane distances. A 3-point location in space ties energy in a dimension. In the geometry we know, the number 3 is the beginning of a plane, and it is bound as such. Not in an empty place, however. Empty does not exist as nothing. Lack of existence does not fit in the definition of existence. The 3-pointed energy binding acquires angular values in relation to the axial values of the lattice, settling in the axis of a specific scaffolding, hence the number 3 for the first element that appears here, the down quark, the up quark, the down quark inside the neutron, and inversely, one might say, the number 3 inside the proton. Hence also the 3 quantum numbers corresponding to the 3 dimensions of space in which the electron moves, as Schrödinger established for the hydrogen atom, and which follows from his equation. 3 parameters of phase dynamics just like in thermodynamics. 3 spatial axes, 3 time periods, V1 that was, V1 that will be, and V1 that is now. Hence, the threefold module constructs time and space. Its fundamental nature stems from the number 3. The number of elements in a given arrangement is crucial to the nature of its existence. We must ask ourselves, why does a neutron proton consist of 3 particles, not 2? Why, for example, doesn't it consist of 4? Examining the mechanics of operation that arise from quantity reveals the nature of numbers. What mechanical possibilities does the triad offer? What a tremendous creative process lay behind this event when, in a place of dual division, the 3 were subsequently constructed to continue their movement? Dawn, noon, and dusk. In order: sunset, sunrise, and zenith. The sunset, Atum, the one who came to be, was. From him next, the sunrise, Hepri, the one who will arise, will be. Zenith, Ra, the one who is, the great one. And he said, Behold, this is the most beautiful image of me, who was and will be. So the now moment rests on 2 arms. Like a plus sign, the fire that burns within the neutron is held in her arms, the negative feminine energy. 2 then have the 2 pluses hold her. The number 3 is catalytic, hence it gives rise to events. More on the number 3 and threefoldness in chapter 3. The image perceived is projected. It is a projection of spatial structure. The space cell in the viewed plane looks like this. And this is sacred geometry, a mystery adapted by cultures and transformed into a symbol, stripped of its meaning. The meaning, however, remains within the shape, preserved from oblivion. The shape of snowflakes, a 6-pointed star, the 0-1 state, neutron proton in the grip of a leap, honeycombs. A cross-section of biological cells, hexagonal chemical structures, and from them structures of nature, 3-dimensional. All are set on a 6-sided cube. In the plane of view, the dimensional axes x, y, z are distributed at 120-degree intervals. Chemical structures also adapt these angular values in the view. In the reality of the lattice, this value corresponds to an angle of 90 degrees. By adopting a different perspective relative to the cube, we obtain a different representation of the 3-dimensional coordinate system, as well as additional dimensional axes. The 0 axis is illustrative. In the lattice structure, it is a 2-sided 0 plane separating 2 sides of reality. It is the space between, hence it is interdimensional. The lattice has a 4-axis system of diagonal axes, diagonals that intersect the cubic measures. The 4-axis system of lattice diagonals aligns with the 3-axis coordinate system in the viewing plane, so that they are not visible as separate. 3 of them coincide with the x, y, and z axis. The 4th is located at a point, as it runs perpendicular to the plane of perception. It is the center point of each cubic measure. On this axis lie the 0 points, the points of zero inclination from the equilibrium position for the cubic units. 0 positions are found at every node of cubic measures, since every node is the center of some cubic measure. 0 positions hold the eightfoldness in the grip of vibrating waves strings, which I will explain as the work progresses. The 4 diagonal lattice axes form regular tetrahedrons in the lattice, whose lateral edges are aligned with the 3-dimensional coordinate system x, y, z. The faces of the tetrahedra, when projected onto the viewing plane, appear as regular triangles, which, in a set of 6, form regular hexagons. The tetrahedra meet at the vertices, at the point of zero inclination from the position of equilibrium of the cubic measures. Zero points are energy that is, though it has never come into being. Thus, it had no beginning and cannot end. It is, though it has not moved from its position of equilibrium. Thus, it is immaculate. It is power, a formless state of energy that takes form as force. Force is an image of energy projected onto the framework of dimension and does not exist without power. 0 positions serve as the framework for the impression of movement. In this sense, 0 positions are the silent witness to the unfolding world, which comes into being precisely through this observation. 2 are the image of 1. All elements of a set possess the properties by which the set is described, including the properties of sequence and composition. There is no other way for an element to fall within the range of the set's properties, within the reality in which it exists. A set of such and such elements is precisely a set of those elements. A set of triangles can contain only triangles. Other shapes are foreign to it. Thus, a set of physical characteristics can contain only those elements that are described according to precisely these characteristics, that is, all existing physical characteristics, including the characteristics of sequence of composition. Every element, if it is physical, is exactly that. Each of us is two-sided, right and left. The tricomposition and the square positions of the triplets are already less visible, and this is the native system, duodecimal, 3 times 4. More on this in chapters 4 and 5. An element of a system contains information about the entire system to which it belongs. Thus, a single element has the potential to become the system in which it exists. Everything in physics comes to life in 2 sides, and one side is the measure of half. For nothing can exist at a point. The life of physics is designed movement. It lives because it sustains itself. It sustains itself because it vibrates. It vibrates because it passes a spark, an electric pulse. It transfers force to gain force. There is always one side that gives, it turns off. There is always another that receives, it lights up. You get something if you spend something. And both sides of this process are two sides of the same, one moment, belonging to a given cycle, in absolute value, 1 second, like night and day. This is how everything in the universe pulsates, constantly switching on and off, passing all information. It is a kind of a food chain. This oscillation is a feature of all elements, from subatomic to hyperatomic, from micrograins to galaxies. It is the pulsation of two sides of everything that exists, including the universe. Everything physical oscillates. As the element, so the entirety of the system. The condition for oscillation is the duality of each element phenomenon. Like everything else, so too the universe does not consist of only one half. In its totality and in the difference between its components, it must be dual. Hence, the cell of the spatial system consists of two cubic measures. It is one, whole, and it is the two. And each of them is a half of the 0-1 state. The propagation of an electromagnetic wave follows precisely this model, a two-cubic cell lattice. This spatial lattice serves as the medium for the waves. Within the two-cubic lattice cell, energy reaches two extremes of displacement from the equilibrium position. It achieves the intended displacement and transition between states. This is a modular shift, a transfer of state, a measure of the oscillation of the phase settings of the dimension, discussed in Chapter 3. A charge being moved with a displacement arm of 1r marks a square area with an arm of 2r and a value of 4r squared. Thus, each action gives rise to a total of 4 actions, not 3, not 2. The vibrating waves between the lattice nodes form a pattern of vibrating strings. They are a pulsating body, the strings, vibrating in 3 axes, in 4 directions, trace out fields between the x, y, and z axes, in the plane of view. And when viewed in a plane, they form a circle that is the projection of a certain circular value. And within it, the flower of life. The flower of life consists of vibrating energy strings held in spatial nodes. The flower of life is the pulsating body of all matter. It is a depiction of the dance of oscillation. The chemical realm provides many examples of this oscillation. Chemical bonds are based on it. Molecular structures are bound by the power of transmission. The glucose molecule C6 H12O6, shown below, in the spatial lattice and its viewing plane. Carbon atoms are black, oxygen atoms are red, and hydrogen atoms are gray. Atoms wandering between chains. Chemical structures accept, release, the element is moved. This is visible as such in the plane of view. Atoms light up in the structure of the lattice. An element can wander because it goes out in one place and lights up in another. And in the place where it goes out, it will light up again. Thus, each element, node, place, is in its dual state, in an alternating state of 0, 1, which takes on various values in diversity. There is and there is not are the first axes of differentiation of the periodic table, C0 and C+. The viewing plane is displayed frame by frame. This is how the impression of movement is created. It is displayed in a vivid and, as a result, organic way. The holographic nature of the world is, in fact, something different from what we understand by the term hologram. In idea, they share common features. In reality, they are entirely different. A wandering proton in hydrogen bonds is an oscillation between 2 points. Common literature describes this as follows. Proton tunneling is a type of quantum tunneling involving the instantaneous disappearance of a proton in one side and the appearance of the same proton at an adjacent site, separated by a potential barrier. Thus, a proton, being on one side, disappears, enters a state of non-existence. On the other side, it lights up, emerges from non-existence. The two sides of this oscillation are two sides of the same phenomenon. These sides are oriented relative to each other. If one side is left, the other is right. If one approaches, the other recedes. If one side goes out, the other lights up. The sides of the phenomenon are in constant communication, by virtue of entanglement. The phenomenon possesses complete information about itself, in the sides of its operation. Basic elements in the design plane do not wander anywhere, and their visible wanderings from one perspective to another are illusory. These wanderings belong to the designed image. The spatial lattice oscillates this way for this apparency. It becomes a landscape of dimension, obtained from variable values. It is not unreal. The landscape of dimension is the effect, design, for a given life. The world is not real, it is relatively real. Thus, it is a relatively real apparentness. My father's house has many rooms, measured for themselves. Each room has its own measure, hence they are a measure dimension. What is perceived is the observation of a state. It is a binding of characteristics. The lattice raises characteristics from itself and extinguishes them. This is how the molecular structure, the whole and everything that is, comes into being. Due to this, it is the mechanism of all tunneling, of transferring contents, regardless of the barrier. The power of the charge is directly proportional to the force of resistance. The force of resistance accumulates the charge. There is no resistance for the transmission itself. Although we perceive it as a breakthrough, The whole existence is in fact effortless. Exertion belongs to the perceived plane. Everything that is apparent is existing. It was designed for an effect, a given state, and that effect lives where it has its place. Each group consists of subgroups. Which of these levels is more real? The human body consists of atoms. Is it the body, or are the atomic forces more real? Physics is the cooperation of all its levels. The fact that something was created from elements other than the visible effect does not mean that the value obtained is unreal. Following this line of reasoning, every element would become illusory, as each contains the parts which are different: electrons, neutrons, and protons. The difference between them is built by the quantities. Is it nitrogen, or 7 protons, neutrons, and electrons? Oxygen? Add one more to the 7, and nitrogen transforms into oxygen. 3 identical elements. If 2 of them are vertical, they are supports. They carry the third element, which is supported, the horizontal element. Together, they form the whole structure. Is this effect apparent? Thus, every physical value is composed of other values that do not cease to be what they are. The apparent journey of the sun across the sky, or the apparent journey of solar systems in galactic disks on the galactic sky, or the journey of a proton in hydrogen bonds, or the apparent journey of a photon which seems to reach its destination by all possible routes. All you see is the end result, but only for the moment in which you perceive it. It is different in the components of which it is composed, and it itself belongs to the composition, to achieve an effect other than what it is in itself. Solar systems, like electrons, will form a galactic image, like an elemental one. About quantum entanglement. 2 sides of one thing belong to it. If one side is right, the other will be left. If one is the upside, the other is the downside. It is enough to see one side to know both. It is enough to grab one and rotate it to swap the positions of the 2 objects relative to each other. Quantum entanglement. Everything that is in a visible state is entangled. Anything that requires another to explain itself is a side of the other. The degree of separation is irrelevant here. Distances are only internal spaces. The range of atomic span, electron frontiers on the arm of distance, from the nucleus to the central fire, just as solar systems to the galactic eye, held by a strong galactic force. This lattice entangles elements that are measurably separate. They are all simultaneously present in it. This lattice is a structure of physical relationality. It is thanks to it that the elements exist in separateness. A cubical spatial lattice is the sum of outflows and inflows. It has its fields, nodes, paths, currents, clusters, and pools, just like in the ocean, so that in the energy once spilled, movement was created, to focus, to disperse again. Physics is the equilibrium of preserved unequal states. Magnetism is its tool of order. It is part of the entanglement engine. It generates paths. It pushes and pulls energy streams. Thus, it can be said that it gives energy an electrical structure, which manifests itself as a feature called charge. Charge informs about the structure that energy takes on, just as the structure organizes building materials, and it becomes one thing, then another, then that thing again. The path of an electromagnetic wave traces out lattice nodes. These are 0 points. Energy emerges from these points and converges towards them. It emerges from 0 and descends to 0. This fact reveals two types of 0 points. Everything occurs in pairs. From this perspective, the different dynamics of interactions in so-called classical and quantum physics seem quite consistent, don't they? The force of interaction increases as an element moves away from 0, strong interaction. The force of interaction increases as the element approaches 0, gravitational, weak interaction. Before we move on to the wave, it is important to understand that every cubic measure is distinct in its essence. Between measures, dimensions, lies that which is intermeasurable, interdimensional. Let's look at it through an analogy. The pause between seconds, a place without time, when the ticking hand of the clock stops for a moment. This pause is neither a moment that has ended, nor one that is beginning. Yet it lasts. This is the moment of transmission of both physical matter and all forms of content. It occurs between bodies, between entities that do not touch each other in physical existence. It is the lattice that transmits touch and all sensations of reality. Through the lattice, bodies interact with one another and sense each other. The transmission occurs between different units of measurement, whether it be a nanometer or a light year. Hence, the entanglement transcends distance, as it takes place within a unified system. There is no distance between the sides, which exist as a unity. Can you raise both hands at once if you want to raise them both? Do you raise your right hand first and then your left hand after a while? This information is present in your body all at once. And how does it look from the perspective of a single cell? Vast spaces separate the right and left sides. From this perspective, there occurs an interaction regardless of distance. The transmission of information regardless of distance is made possible by the cellular structure of the spatial lattice, which is the structure of life. There is always only one given system, regardless of whether it is composed of 100 or 1,000 elements, by analogy with bar magnets. A single magnet has two poles of action. This is the same as a magnet made up of several smaller ones. A magnet made up of several small ones as a single unit invariably has two sides, with the same mechanism of action as a single magnet. And conversely, cut the element in half. Each half will automatically have two sides. This is the future of space travel, in practical terms, without actually traveling through space. Let's take a closer look at this. It is certainly possible, since this is a matter of wave mechanics. To do this, let's isolate the action of the electromagnetic wave in the x and y axis planes. Then, for the purposes of this diagram, let's consider the action along the y-axis. Along the y-axis, I divide each 0 point into two components. The right side of the 0 and the left side of the 0 define a nonlinear, not scalar, point. Each left side in the figure is labeled with the letter L, and each right side with the letter P. Let's examine this pattern over the entire period, one complete wave cycle, by plotting the individual points of action on the y-axis. Next, let's shift the single moment of action by half. Whatever falls out on the right is exactly what flows in there. Whatever flows in on the left is exactly what falls out there. This depicts a pair of black holes, as, so to speak, the two sides of a certain singularity. This is the mechanism by which all states, including momentum, are transmitted. This is the source of the interplay of action and reaction. Has no one ever asked the fundamental question, where does the reaction to an action come from? From what underlying layer does it emerge? Indeed, from the lattice. And every action, sensation, and influence the world has on us is transmitted through the lattice. For more on this, see Chapter 4. On a cosmic scale, the influence of the lattice is visible and is referred to as the gravitational influence of dark matter. This is the visible influence of lattice fields. They bend, stretch, compress, and refract light. All of this is nothing more than an image of energy projected onto the frame of the dimension. The frameworks are like the structure of a house, with foundations at the bottom and a crown at the top, and internal spaces, atomic distances, r from the nucleus to the edges. My father's house has many rooms. And just as in construction, in the case of a house, there are structural elements that are stable, strong interactions, and movable, sliding elements, weak interactions, radiation and gravity. To move around it and live, to come closer and move away. Thus, all large structures observed on a cosmic scale are visible constructions of space. When viewed correctly, places where there is nothing will form a tapestry. The space lattice is the structure of the model of cellular life. Everything has a cellular structure, every composition is nuclear in nature, and everything has a membrane. The shell, boundary ranges, the skin that encloses the element within the internal arrangement of internal components and distinct features. And so, the invisible boundary of our solar system, as observed recently, is the membrane of the cell of space. Our system itself, physical composition, is strictly repeated in every element. It does not matter whether something is smaller or larger. Measures are relative. They exist only in relation to something else. What is larger from one perspective is smaller from another. Mega structures, cosmic walls, are like the membrane of a biological cell. What comes last is also what comes first. Everything can be explained by the same principles, Pierre-Simon Laplace. The kinetic energy of bodies in motion is proportional to their mass and the square of their velocity. The essence of the theory of relativity, isn't it? What follows is, the amount of living force is not lost, but passes between bodies and forms of movement. This leads directly to the conclusion that the formless quantity of energy is conserved in changes of motion, and further, that in an isolated system, the total energy remains constant. It can only change its form or be transferred between objects, while maintaining the same total amount of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only take on different forms, and these forms must undergo change. This law applies to energy in general, and since everything is composed of energy, all its visible forms result from its temporary binding. This is true of all material forms and all elementary particles. Nothing that is a form can be final, hence it is not permanent. A final destination would mean the end of everything that is. Nothing would move forward, but it does move forward, doesn't it? Time would end everywhere at once. Hence our existence is proof of infinity. Hence the conclusion. The principle of energy conservation in equilibrium. Everything physical exists in two states: power, energy in its zero state, and force, energy in a state of displacement from equilibrium. The code 01 is an image of this. Ultimately, the system of the whole of life is isolated. Ultimacy does not mean its limits, but that it is infinitely whole. The system of life consists of layers and dimensions, in which energy is enclosed in work, circulating on the path of transformation. In the system of life, the value of energy is constant. It cannot be created or destroyed. It does not diminish. Its absolute value, power, is immutable, immaculate. In relative value, force, it takes on a variable form. There are no boundary conditions for the expression of form. At the same time, the sum of expressions always achieves balance. It never loses the result of the equation. Light and darkness, life and death, right and left are brothers of one another. They are inseparable. Because of this, neither are the good, good, nor evil, evil, nor is life, life, nor death, death. For this reason, each one will dissolve into its earliest origin. The Apocryphal Gospel of Philip, translated by Wesley W. Eisenberg, the Gnostic Society Library, the Nag Hammadi Library. All natures, all forms, all creatures exist in and with one another, and they will be resolved again into their own proper root. The Gospel of Mary, Coptic language, Sahitic dialect. Kenneth G. Wilson, Nobel Prize winner 1982, describes that when reaching a critical scale, microscopic details become irrelevant. Forms, structures, differences disappear, leaving only what is fundamental. Forms and creatures are merely effective degrees of freedom. They dissolve, losing their meaning in renormalization. Thus, everything will return to its earliest origin. Where is the energy that creates the leaf when it loses moisture? The perception of loss and end are distorted forms. The energy of the leaf is held in the embrace of the body of the planetary mother. The earth is the cradle of maternal tenderness, lined with the gentleness of birthed nature. From it arises from the dead each morning every leaf, as does the entire form of the visible world from spatial structure. For everything that had to begin never truly lived. There is no life apart from the power. When perception shifted its focus to a measurable form, it invented death. It died along with it. Since it could not die, it gave rise to a cycle of constant return. When perception shifts the center of gravity back into the power of its being, into the realm of energy that does not decay, does not arise, does not lose. It will become a living force that does not perish, but passes between bodies and forms of movement. Thus it will pass through matter, creating beloved forms, which it had long forgotten. Where is summer when it is not here? Where has the scent of a blooming meadow gone, and the volume of its sound? When summer is not here, it is on the other side of the sphere. The seasons do not pass, they circle back around. Halving and doubling on the arm, the dynamics of measurement. All creatures exist within one another and with one another. If an element constitutes a given system, it must internally consist of the very same. After all, it must derive from itself the information about how it should be in order to constitute the system of which it is a part. AB, BA, plus minus, minus plus. Each element is a measure of itself as one, and a measure of the combination as half, just as it is itself composed of two. Every human being is a measure of themselves as one, and a measure of the combination as half of their own species, which is the gender, just as they themselves are composed of two sides, hemispheres, the subconscious and the conscious, and their life from father and mother. Halving, half of r, and doubling 2r of the arm. This is always r of the distance, for the moment when that distance exists. Let's take a closer look. Thought experiment. Let us consider the interaction between objects m1 and m2 along the arm r for the first moment. For the sake of clarity, let us call the value of this arm the initial value r. Next, for the second moment, we perform the first operation. We double the lever arm between the objects. We obtain 2r times the initial value from the first moment. At that moment, the distance obtained between the objects becomes the only distance that exists between them. For the second moment, the initial value r no longer exists. The value 2r becomes the arm, the distance r between objects m2 and m1. The value of this distance is duplicated with each subsequent doubling, with each subsequent application of the operation r plus 1 times itself. Every plus 1 operation adds the measure of 1, which, as 1, exists at the moment of addition. Therefore, for the third moment, the plus 1 operation will result in a 4r value for the output value. It is not 3r, which would be consistent with standard mathematics. Physical phenomena do not follow a linear metric of its progression. Thus, doubling the distance value results in twice the initial distance value. Doubling the distance value twice results in 4 times the initial distance value, not 3 times, and further, tripling the distance value yields 8 times the initial distance value, not 4 times. The sequence goes as follows. Each term consists of the 2 preceding terms and is itself half of the next. In a sequence that curves, the Fibonacci sequence, half is a component, one of 2 parts. This sequence is evident in cell division, where a single division yields 2 values, cells, a double division yields 4 values, cells, and a triple division yields 8 values, cells. Adding the digits of successive elements in the sequence yields another cyclic sequence with decreasing values, as shown in the figure below. Dividing by 4 yields 16, with a digit sum of 7. Dividing by 5 yields 32, with a digit sum of 5. And dividing by 6 yields 64, with a digit sum of 1. The tonal sequence concludes with the measure 64, which appears in quadratic and cubic progression, as shown next. Dividing by 7 yields 128, whose digits add up to 2, which marks the beginning of the next octave, with the same total sequence. Dividing by 8 yields 256, whose digits adds up to 13, which sums to 4. Dividing by 9 yields 512, whose digits add up to 8. Here is a biological numerical sequence: 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1. Taking into account the zero state prior to the division, the biological sequential digital sequence represents a 7-step musical octave. It also corresponds to the 7 electron shells in the periodic table. All physical quantities have two values, absolute. This is a measure of sequential quantity. The internal measure of 1 is a measure of quality, and it is relative. It is a measure of pressure, internal density, and the n-fold increase of that 1. This is how physics shapes geometric spaces, task-specific capacities for molecular process structures. This is the engineering of living integrated circuits. This is the physics mathematics, geometrics. Let's translate this into the progress in the square field value. For the first moment, we range from 0 to 1. The r squared value is equal to the relative value 1 squared. For the second moment, the interval from 1 to 2, a single increase in distance, the value of r squared is equal to the relative value 4 squared. For the third moment, the interval from 2 to 3, a twofold increase in distance, the r squared value is equal to the relative value 16 squared. For the fourth moment, the interval from 3 to 4, a threefold increase in distance, the r squared value, is equal to the relative value 64 squared. The resulting sequence consists of successive powers of 4. 4 to the power of 0 equals 1. 4 to the power of 1 equals 4. 4 to the power of 2 equals 16. 4 to the power of 3 equals 64. This is a geometric sequence of the dependence of the force of interaction on distance. More on the digit 4 in chapter 4. Let's translate this into the progression of a cubic lattice value. The output module is a cubic block with a side length of r. A value between 0 and 1 represents a half value, because nothing in physics exists in isolation, and there is no such thing as a single-sided entity. The measures of nature are half values. This is precisely what is necessary. It allows for adoption of a time of one of the 0, 1 states. Mark the halfway point and the other half will also be marked as the unmarked half. As mentioned earlier, the unit cell of the spatial system is a 2-cubic cell, serving as a measure of the spatial displacement of the charge within the range of the phase. To illustrate the geometric progression and spatial increment, the charge jump in the wave, I depict it as shown in the figure below. The 2-cubic unit spatial cell presented in this way, constitutes a quarter of the volume required for a spherical structure. When doubled, this results in two 2-cubic spatial cells, or 4 cubic blocks as half units. This is half the volume required for a spherical structure. 4 half measures allow for 2 states, 0, 1, or to put it another way, 4 states, 0, 1, 0, 1. Next, the whole is doubled again, yielding 4 2-cubic spatial cells, or 8 cubic blocks, as half measures. This is consistent with the numerical sequence of biological division. 4 2-cubic cells allow for 4 states of 0, 1, or to put it another way, 8 half measures allow for 8 states, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. This provides the full volume measure for a spherical structure. This closes the sequence, which ends up where it started, at a cubic block. The end becomes the beginning, the larger becomes smaller. It is the beginning of the next sequence, where it is as a half of a 2-cubic spatial cell. A cubic measure consists of 8 measures like itself. A measure composed of 8 is 1/8 of the next full cubic volume. This yields a value of 64 measures, a square value expressed cubically. It is also the value that closes the biological numerical sequence, the value of 64 cellular measures. Composed of 8, it will amount to 8. Growth in life sequences always occurs in 2 directions, even when it appears that something is larger in one direction and smaller in the other. Let's translate the spatial sequence into a progression of informational values. The basic unit of information, the modular unit, is the bit. A bit consists of 2, as it has 2 states. These 2 states represent the 2 sides of everything that exists. Nothing exists as just one side. A pair of bits is a 4-state system, and the structure of information storage begins with it. Since the arrangement of 4 is a matrix structure, when multiplied, it offers endless possibilities. 0, 1, 1, 0. This is the square of reciprocity, the square of light, from the theory of relativity. More on this in chapter 4. In computer science, forms of information storage represent the following values, consistent with the sequence of square values. 1 block, 4 states. 2 blocks, 16 states. 3 blocks, 64 states. Let's take a look at how the informational record appears in the spatial lattice, since this is where the model originates. Due to our perception of events as a sequence of consequences, I use the following notation for the 0-1 state in a 2-cubic spatial cell. For the 0 states, a colorless cubic measure for the one state a colored one. The doubled 2-cubic block is the first spatial module designed to set information in motion through time. The space-time system is based on 4 pillars, the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 quadrants of the wheel of cyclical motion, to return to the place from which one departed. This is part of the design of this world. The 4 system is the foundation of the structure. In computer science, this is evident in practice. The first block consists of two-state bits, which yields a matrix of 4 half measures, 4 states, 0, 1, 0, 1. The second block of information contains 16 states. This consists of 8 0, 1 states. I will give an example of this coding sequence here. The state of matter of alkanes depends on the number of carbon atoms, where from 0 to 4, the alkane is a gas, from 5 to 16, the alkane is a liquid, and from 17 onward, the alkane is a solid. The third block contains 64 states, which in the lattice gives 64 cubic measures, and this is already visible in molecular coding, where energy settles along the axis of the cubic measure. These are the 0 and 1 axes, intersecting at right angles. The second set consists of alternating 0, 1 and 1, 0 axes, also intersecting at right angles. If some of them are vertical and horizontal, the others are diagonal, and vice versa. The model illustrates the relational encoding of binary states in a three-dimensional spatial lattice, where space serves as the medium for states, and matter is a binary configuration. State 1 represents expression, presence, positivity. State 0 represents absence, disappearance, negativity. This is, once again, the order of the original matrix 0, 1, 1, 0. It then contains the assigned states, in accordance with the name, up to infinity. The 0 axis is the minus axis, and the smaller axis, the vowel axis. The 1 axis is the plus axis and the greater axis, and the consonant axis. This is an exchange system. On the wall's surface, it appears as follows. There is a cross-referenced diagram of information. This is the very cross of matter, an image of matter in energy. The progression of the sequence 1, 4, 16, 64 is evident in DNA coding. In the context of DNA, this is particularly significant, where the 4 nucleotides A, T, C, G yield the following possible sequences. 1 nucleotide, 4 to the power of 1 equals 4. 2 nucleotides, 4 to the power of 2 equals 16. 3 nucleotides. 4 to the power of 3, 64. Hence, the following follows. 1. A single nucleotide, symbolically. 4. The number of nitrogenous bases. 16. The number of possible D-nucleotides. 64. The number of codons, 3 nucleotide sequences encoding amino acids. The 4-part pattern, as the above information shows, is the basic unit of the lattice. As shown below, it constructs drawings of nature. Hence, we know that it builds structures. Physical, including chemical and biological. Everything is physical. The system of 4 has many characteristics from the fields of mathematics, of physics, geometrics. The numbers we know from characteristics reveal the significance of these characteristics within the lattice. These are the properties that constitute realities. The axes that define rhombic shapes in nature are the axes of prime numbers. Geometrization of prime numbers in lattice space. Prime numbers, like noble gases, do not react, they are indivisible. Hence, they hold physical shapes together. Shapes in physics are mathematical, and the numbers themselves are structures diverging in spatial system. Prime numbers, which ultimately find their place in the duodecimal system, demonstrate that it is the duodecimal system, not the decimal system, that is, our mathematical system. Within it, physics will take on a new phase for us. The seal that stands at the gates of reality is the blueprint from which the image of the actual world emerges. It is a signature imprinted throughout the physical structures of existence, which is the certainty that the world springs directly from it. 2 is the image of the One. Each of the 2 consists of 2. It could not consist of 2 if it were not itself composed of them. Thus, the 2 is the 4. 4, in terms of movement, signifies the infinite. Life which persists always strives to expand its reality. Thus, the time has come to bring these possibilities to life, designed for this very purpose. 4 2-cubic spatial cells serve as the center for 3 axially vibrating strings waves, forming complete multiples of 8. They constitute all solid spheres, central nuclei, solar foci, disks and orbitals, which from our perspective race freely through space. Within the lattice, things unfold quite differently. Linear progress is a perception within our own dimension. The lattice displays, structures and enriches all movement within its own structure, without measure. It is impossible to count how many worlds a point contains. The reality of the lattice is string theory. From one perspective, the strings vibrate chaotically. From another, they paint a precisely drawn picture of existence. They are the flower of life. Introduction to Chapter 3. All creatures exist within one another and with one another. Each term consists of the two preceding ones and is itself half of the next. The order of this progression is the order of numerical sequences. In the Fibonacci sequence, each successive term is the sum of the two preceding ones, and each is half of the next one in absolute terms. In relative terms, each term and its half have a different internal measure. 3 as r plus 5, as r gives 8, as 2r. The Fibonacci sequence is a sequence that curves to obtain a matrix for spiral spatial shapes, of which there are many in nature. Spiral lines twist to the left or to the right in two directions of reality. Right or left-handed growth is generated by the polarization of the component fields. Polarization is directly the weight of the fields. Polarization is the dynamic relationship between smaller and larger. It is a measure of area and volume. It is a measure of charge per unit area, a measure of pressure and density. Polarization is not merely a distinction between the existing two. It is not a distinction between vertical and horizontal, or positive and negative. For positive and negative, it is the weight of their energetic fields. Since polarization determines the pressure parameter, it is one of the three quantum numbers that Schrödinger wrote about. The three quantum numbers are three phase numbers, when understood correctly. Weak and strong interactions, hard and soft, fewer electrons and more. 1/3 down quark, up quark, 2/3 from the measure of 1. 3/3 is 3 half measures. Therefore, this division can take the values 1 and half, as well as 2 and 1. The polarization of the smaller and larger parts yields a relationship. This relationship determines the direction of rotation, while the angle of rotation determines the rotational speed and angular momentum. The relationship between the forces of a pair of black holes is a proportion that determines the rate and direction of rotation of the galactic disk. The relationship between two forces within an element between its sides, which further implies as between elements, is an interaction. From the two sides, singularity arises. In the oneness, the two touch. Read on to Chapter 3. The current generating mechanism of atomic oscillations. Everything physical is electrical in nature. Energy currents flow ceaselessly through the entire physical structure. Hence, all matter is animated. There is no inanimate matter, hence everything oscillates. Oscillation is part of the mechanism that generates current, so that everything may be animated. Therefore, we must consider what it means that everything oscillates. Oscillation is a repetitive change during which a specific quantity alternates between two states. Hence, the condition for oscillation is the duality of every phenomenon. The duality inherent in molecular structure is the 0-1 state, represented by the neutron and the proton. Thus, the components of atomic nuclei constantly oscillate, transferring between each other the 0 and 1 states. That is to say, the condition for oscillation is the two-sidedness of each phenomenon, as well as the two-sidedness of the sum of these phenomena. Hence, the entire universe is composed of two sides. The two sides of reality are connected to each other by pairs of black holes scattered throughout the molecular structure, with the main ones in a pair in the center of galaxies. All of existence is interwoven from both sides. Between them, charge is exchanged. It flares up and fades away. The reality we perceive flickers, yet imperceptibly, being one side one moment and the other the next. The focus of observation is shifted as charge. Thus, each of us jumps between the sides of the matrix. Each of the two sides of reality also has two sides. It must have two sides, since it must contain information about what it is composed of. The system repeats its sides in its elements. Next, since one side of reality already has two, the two sides of reality together have four. Thus, this arrangement of four is repeated in each of the two sides of reality. It is the matrix 0, 1, 1, 0. This is a 2-bit 4-state circuit which enables motion. This brings us to oscillations in a 4-state molecular system. The initial element is fundamental to the structure of building a molecular sequence, and that element is the helium molecule. Hydrogen, which is earlier, is modular, and it is its nature that forms oscillating molecules. One should consider what mechanism makes the fusion of hydrogen into helium possible, where 2 out of 4 hydrogen atoms are able to pack themselves together, returning to form a neutron. Since this happens, it must result from its mechanical capabilities. Hydrogen, one might say, breathes. It inhales and exhales, contracts and expands like a heart, alternately unfolding and folding. This mechanism enables the oscillation of everything that exists. Returning to the helium molecule, the components of the nuclei oscillate, alternating between the 0 and 1 positions. Neutrons diffuse into protons and electrons, and these in turn retreat back into the interior of the neutron. Thus, the 0 and 1 states change their positions, which in turn changes the position of the electron, seemingly shifting it from place to place. This is simply the oscillation of the electron and its path, back and forth, and this is what constitutes electric current. At the same time, this oscillation does not change the total number of constituents, so every atom always retains its components. That is why it is invisible. Knowing this mechanism will allow us to extract energy directly from the molecular system, from electron oscillations. When a charge is extracted, the spatial lattice will immediately replenish what has been taken. A visible manifestation of this oscillation is an electromagnetic wave, in which the charge is released and withdrawn, causing it to shift between the two sides. The breathing of hydrogen within its molecular structure originates in its quark structure. Every instance of the number 3 acts as a catalyst. Hence, quarks arranged in groups of 3 are an element of this change. Within the components of the nuclei, the value of 1 is constantly in motion, shifting along the lattice arms, which causes shifts in the 0-1 states, the vibration of the strings, and the movement of the wave. The value of 1 is driven by a variable magnetic field, as it constantly changes direction. More on this in the following chapters. Welcome. Conclusions after Chapter 2. Everything composed of cells possesses its own cell of wholeness, and this cell, by virtue of its structure, possesses the qualities of independence and autonomy. Without access to this information, we are at the mercy of circumstances of a projected plane. We mechanically replicate conditions and dependencies within our own cell. Thus, they occur for us. The reality we perceive is not shared but made common from the collective perception of the whole. The information the cell possesses influences the image of reality. This influence, however, is not directly visible to the individual most often. It depends on internal balance. Before chemical balance lies, in essence, physical balance. It cannot be achieved without an understanding of the nature of physical oppositions in the body. Creating one's own qualities is not a matter of faith, the size of a mustard seed. It is a matter of practical knowledge, wisdom lived out in daily life. Self-awareness. The union of two, matrix 0, 1, 1, 0. If two make peace with one another in the same house, they will say to the mountain, "Move," and it will move. The Gospel of Tomasz. The union of two unites in effect its desire born in cause. It is from the will of existence that action arises, which in effect defines the reason for its purposefulness at the beginning. Thus, the two who are as four hold infinite motion in their hands. Movement being complete is that which creates worlds in physics. Now and here, two has become the value of one, because one has become the value of half. Behold the quantum observer within the system. I invite everyone to embrace their own independence. Every cell of an individual establishes its own law. This law is enforced upon it. This is the law of life, standing above all other laws. What you do to another is consent, a mechanical path created for action-reaction between individuals, since what comes out of a cell is replicated within it. You will not take away another's freedom, yours will not be taken away. This is the only path to freedom. If you enforce something upon another, it will be enforced upon you. What you don't want, and you define it precisely, is exactly what you define, and that is how events come into being. Also, because nothing in physics can truly touch anything else, everything contained within you is brought to life from the depths of your being, from your lattice cell, according to your will. Decide. The 0 point in every cell is the energy that is, though it has never came to be. Within you is an observer in the position of power. It strengthens the force that physically manifests. You are a witness to your own world. Chapter 3, 4, 5 are coming.